record this. Mitch, welcome. I see that you have a leg boot on. So today I want to talk about what we initially began talking about, or begin where we left off at the end of last time. So we were looking at the 2007 Comprehensive Plan Transportation section. I'm going to go ahead and share that up on our screen here. And we had some pretty robust conversation over what was in this section in the last meeting. And to help us kind of tailor our thoughts, we did hand out a rubric and sent out a rubric to everybody to really start saying, did we actually achieve what we set out to do? And not only that, but if we didn't, are there barriers to achieving it that are still around? And also, should it continue to be carried forward? And I'm hoping that we can have a conversation to kind of highlight what things stuck out to the committee, so that we can begin to create some emerging concepts from this group, so that when we enter July and August, we can start to really shape those ideas and start putting pen to paper for future goals, objectives, and strategies. And I realize that a number of these elements in the 2007 plan, of course, have updates along the way. So at the first meeting, we referenced the 2017 Complete Streets Policy and the 2018 ADA Transition Policy. There's also the 2019 update to the Winona Airport ordinances that we can all kind of provide additional information to. I realize that one element in this plan, the Port Authority components, we really should bring in Lucy McMartin to our next meeting to provide some additional background, because freight is one of those key components as we look at the structure of our transportation network for the city of Winona. So with that brief preface, I want to open it up to the subcommittee. Was there anything that really stuck out that maybe you felt wasn't achieved that needed to be achieved, or should still be carried forward, or anything that was glaringly obvious to you that was achieved and should not have to be put in the next plan any longer? I see some people thinking. You want to go ahead and grab that microphone? The first reference there, Carrie did mention we built the bridge, or MnDOT built the bridge, and that's absolutely true. One of the elements listed in the comprehensive plan from 2007 was to be really hyper conscious of the surrounding historic elements in particular, and as well as connecting bicycling and foot traffic across the bridge. And I think that was accomplished fairly well with that shared use path on the western portion of the new bridge. And additionally, the Huff-Lamberton Mansion is, of course, still around. The YMCA, which was determined eligible for the National Register, was torn down for a future parking, or for a current parking lot as a separate project, but it was retained through that project. That's a really good point. We did achieve that. We could probably cross that off of our list. Any other thoughts, initial glaringly obvious things, or things you want to talk about?
Luke, was it your plan to go through each section by section, do you think, after? So right now it's just initial thoughts?
I just want initial thoughts.
Okay.
And I do want to take it section by section, but I don't want to spend the entirety of our time just looking backward, because we do have a few other documents from beyond 2007 to really talk about as well. Yeah.
So the one area for me that I'm looking at that I think that we have some areas that weren't achieved are on the rail relocation and safety safety improvements there. I mean, we did, I think you said we started down at the Levy Park, right? Rail yard relocation with some of that work down there. And also I've seen, rail crossing improvements as in just taking care of normal wear and tear, resurfacing, putting in the new concrete, crosses like that. So I think overall that's been pretty good. But the movement or Canadian Pacific Rail Yard relocation and then the Wall Street track, there hasn't been anything done, on either of those. So. And I do really believe that, like, for instance, that one where we talked about the CP rail relocation, if that were to be done, that could alleviate a lot of the congestion that we see with the switching activity, right, that takes place on that across like Mankato and other areas there, if that was actually relocated the yards out farther. So I mean, it could alleviate to the point where having to do an overpass or whatever may not be a necessity anymore.
That's a really good point. And I do appreciate you noting that we do have some improvements that are still, Levy Park in particular. And then we referenced last time, and I pulled up the document this time. We referenced the Great River Trail, or not Great River Trail, excuse me, the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago line, and having a couple of new improvements related to sidings that are proposed through that project as well. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Any other initial glaring thoughts? Things that need to be included or not included?
In particular, I guess. So the one that I know didn't get done was trail connections. And maybe it did kind of get done, but I guess my initial thought was there's like 4 different generations of wayfinding signage, I think, around town. Like there's some from the 90s, there's some from the 2000s, there's some from very recently, and they're all at random sporadic points. So there's no real way of knowing how to get from Sugarloaf, say, to Lake Park, to, Levy Park, across the bridge to Latch Island, which are kind of like our 4 big parks. So and then a few other themes and things that didn't happen was like traffic calming measures. I know that like curb bump outs were basically shot down most of the time, it seems like. And things aren't regularly, well, they are regularly painted, but like for the example of like Riverview Drive, I mean, they painted it and then they repainted it and gave the bike lane even less space. And that's just one example. So I think for me, like a low hanging fruit thing would be to like paint the roads, as they should be painted for pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars, because I think there's definitely room for everyone. And that'd be, I don't know how expensive that is or anything, but yeah. So first thoughts.
Yeah, that regular maintenance of our current infrastructure, whether it is just as simple as painting, is a really good point, something that we do need to talk about. And then those trail connections is something that, plans take time. In 2018, I'm pulling up here on the screen, you'll see the connection corridors through the 2018 Park and Recreation Master Plan. And a lot of those elements are those trail connection elements. So things like 2A and 2B connecting over to the bluffs along Huff Street and then over to the Flyway Trail, or other elements like the river road or the river connector, which the Transformative Projects Subcommittee is actually in deep discussions about. So they're kind of taking that on as a transformative project that can be a spine for this overall connection program.
And 2 things I'll just note, just talking about those trail connections in there, at 2A and Huff Street and 61, some improvements that were done not too long ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago, substantially better than it was before. Maybe not perfect, but at least there's a sidewalk to go across and a refuge island for people. Yeah, and so you have that. And I'll just note another thing too, with redevelopment of the Kmart on Viola Street into Gunderson. They reestablished that shared use path on the east side of the road there. And just south of there, the doll dealership put in a multi-use trail connection. So that, in my mind, is another great opportunity for a connection right there. If there's something that can be done within the current right-of-way of Viola Street, because the wetland goes pretty much right up to the curb almost on the east side of that street. But is there a way to utilize a single lane of traffic or something like that, turning off of 61 onto Viola to continue that shared use path and make that connection to 61? And then once you get across 61, you can go up through the Doll property onto the path that they have through the rear of their property and get up onto Lake Boulevard and behind. So I would see that as definitely one of the, in my mind, priority trail connections over the next 20, 25 years here. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Just one more quick question. The one that came to mind was the Louisa Street extension. Why did that not happen? I mean, it would seem like, again, for truck traffic and stuff, that would be a perfect outlet, you know, for them, right? And then take some of that congestion off Mankato and stuff. So I don't know if anybody has any background or why that didn't end up happening.
Luke, you can go ahead on this. I don't recall. I know Brian, I think Brian touched on it at the last meeting, and it was something that was considered at one point.
Recall that after dredging the lake, there was a tax referendum, sales tax referendum, dredge the lake. Then after that stopped, there was another referendum to continue it for transportation projects. And the big one was Louisa Street and some things down in the town, and the voters voted it down.
That said, I do think it is an idea that still persists in the community. There was a recent article in the Post about it. It does continue to bring up or be brought up here in this meeting as well. And if that is a priority that this group does bring up, it is a large project. And if there's room for robust conversation, this is one of the reasons why we created the Transformative Projects Subcommittee, is so that we could say, yes, we're going to reference it in this group's section, but more robust conversation needs to happen. And so it can be not so much a giant hallmark of this section of the plan, but can be kind of put in that Transformative Project section.
It's probably water under the bridge now, but I mean, as I think maybe it was originally envisioned, if 43 could have went right through where the river hotels are right now, and then connected up with Louisa Street, that would have been a perfect, obviously, truck route and stuff through there. But that doesn't, unless it would be a very large overpass.
Randy, you said that the switching areas, if they were moved, you're thinking that wouldn't be needed for the rail yards? And can you explain? I don't know where they are exactly.
Yeah, so the CP yards right now are right downtown, basically where the Amtrak station is right now. And so they do a lot of their switching activity there, which pushes them back across, you know, Huff Street and into Mankato. And then eventually, I mean, there's some down all the way down by Louisa and stuff down through there. So I think somebody, or at least it was proposed in here, that all move out. I thought maybe past or into Goodview or in that area way out there where they already have, you know, that overpass through there. So then if they did all of their switching operations out in that area, it would relieve, that's the, you know, when a train is just running through, and if they're going at their whatever 30 or whatever that their speed restriction runs, it usually, you know, it's 5 minutes or less, right? It's the switching activity that ends up 15 minutes or longer, sometimes half an hour, you know, depending on what they're doing, that really causes that congestion. So
On that, there was something in here about the Wall Street rail line. And that probably isn't gonna go away, or sure can't go away if you take out the UP downtown, because there's a loop through there. You gotta have one or the other or both. But that line comes into Wall Street off the main line from the west, right? And then turns north along Wall Street. What if that line came in from the east? So they do their backing up and whatnot over off of Louisa Street. So take some of the rail traffic off the Mankato Avenue.
That's a good suggestion. And I will note, you know, the common saying is that railroads have more power than God. And so these conversations do take a long time to develop. I know that we've been having conversations specifically about some of these rail sidings for a number of years, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't include them in this plan, of course.
The rail line having used to live on the south end of Liberty Street, and there used to be some switches there, and every time a train go by, we hammer, 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 hammer. They did take some of those are out, and some was be, is it RTP, used to be a furniture warehouse there by Amtrak. They took some switches out of there, so it was more smooth welded rail, and really quieted it down. But yeah, they're not, like I say, they're private industry and they don't really care too much about us.
All right, any other comments or initial thoughts before we start working our way through? Okay.
I'm shy to say it because it's all I ever talk about, but there have definitely been some improvements in the transit service. They got those shelters in and they have finally schedules posted, and they changed the routes, and I guess that's up for debate if that was an improvement or not. But I still think as far as getting it where everybody can get on the bus is where we still need to put some energy. And also the evening and the Saturday service has been added, but only one dial-a-ride. And so it's not practical for people to, they can't depend on it because if someone else is using it, they can't. And I don't think that's the right solution. And I do understand they're gonna get Sunday service, but I imagine it'll be also one dial-a-ride, so it will have the same issue.
I just have a quick question. As I was going through this, as we were going through this, it came to mind that if things like these rail crossings, which I know we're aiming for the biggest ideas at this point and like dreaming as big as we can, but I'm wondering if there's practicality to taking things off of the big dreams list so that things that are more realistic can be achieved. Is that a part of the planning process? I assume we're not at that part of the planning process and we're still dreaming, but is there some weight put to that? Like, why keep fighting the fight with the railroad if what we could get done is improve trails and transit service?
As we look at setting the goals and objectives and the strategies for the actual writing of this section of the plan, I do think that's a really important thing to consider. If we feel that these big ideas are still worth putting in as a goal, then we can still include them as a goal, but they don't need to be a significant portion of this section of the document. I think that there's a pretty clear suggestion from city residents through our phase 1 engagement that there's an emphasis on how we can be an active, approachable community, and particularly recreation and natural resource access continually is brought up. So you're not alone in seeing that there might be more robust sections for park and recreation, more robust sections for walkability, multimodal transportation, et cetera. So I do expect that some of those will be more robust than other elements of the section. And that might actually be a good chance to mention, you know, we have the 2017 Complete Streets policy, which is more specific as well. And one of the things that I expect will come out of this process will be, it's time to update that again. A reminder to go out and update that again, because we need to reiterate a lot of those nitty-gritty goals as well as the large overarching concepts. All right, not seeing anybody lunging for microphones or volunteering to speak a little bit further, I do want to take some moments to kind of walk through what we felt. So looking at the overall issues, access barriers for rail storage and at-grade crossings, we've already spoken a little bit about this, but specifically impeding riverfront access and bicycle and pedestrian circulation. I imagine that we still feel that this is an ongoing issue that should be reaffirmed in the plan. Is that correct? I'm seeing some head nods. I'm happy to continue talking. All right, alternative transportation modes. How can bicycle, pedestrian, and transit use be encouraged and enhanced? And there again, we have additional planning documents. I expect that this is still a work in progress. People feel that it's important to include. Is that correct? Seeing head nods. Port and commercial harbor, how to maintain and improve the functioning of the port while minimizing conflicts with recreational river use and natural resources. So here I will make a note that when this plan was originally written, we only had the one dock and we've added an east dock and currently are making significant repairs to our west dock. And there are a number of different intermodal transport sites along the river that are private as well. So we are still seeing ongoing use there. I do think that weighing the balance between recreational access is one of those questions as well. And we see that come into conversation a lot, particularly with the number of dockings we have for visitors to our community, as well as questions like, can I just show up in my kayak and dock at the levee and access downtown Winona? So there might be, in my perspective, there might be a need to continue to address that. I'm seeing some head nods. Lots of head nods. I love how reaffirming we are. The 2007 plan must have been really, really good because everybody's really on top of it. leading in or continuing that, segueing nicely, intermodal connections. So a significant intermodal connection point, can connections between river and rail and truck be improved? So better container facilities. There was a conversation in 2007, and it's later on in the rubric related to a container transfer facility. And there was a beginning of an idea that I think probably closed in terms of available land for that type of facility. I do want to invite Community Development Director Lucy McMartin, who runs the Port Authority, to our next meeting to maybe talk a bit more robustly about some of that. But how do we feel about that issue here? Brian, you just look like you're so close to saying something every time I open my own mouth, so.
I mean, it seems busy. I think last meeting you said we have like one of the busiest ports on the Mississippi River, you know? So there's trucks going in and out of the docking places all the time. It seems like we achieved that issue and goal, and I don't know if it really even needs to be there. That's what I think.
All right, that's a good note. Randy?
Yeah, so talking about the intermodal, I think, right, Rich Microot does have that intermodal facility, right? That's truck or train to truck and stuff on through there. We don't have, I guess, a container though to barge facility right now. So
Yeah, the McRoot property is exactly the one that I was
Oh,
referencing.
okay.
Perfect. All right, until Brian stops teasing and almost grabbing microphones, we'll continue on. The trail connections, I think the conversation that we've had already is a reiteration that that's important to us. Truck traffic and managing truck traffic and truck route systems and how it could be improved. Randy alluded this already. You know, we could have rerouted Highway 43 back in the day or worked with MnDOT to do so. I think that Brian DeFrang, our Public Works Director, said it pretty clearly at our last meeting too, that the amount of investment that MnDOT has made on Highway 43 probably makes it seem unlikely that we'd be rerouting truck traffic through the middle of our community, or the highways through the middle of our community. How do we feel about that?
I just kind of I feel like I want to second what Diane said before, in that like I want to focus on more like immediate things that we can enact like now, because like you just said, MnDOT, I mean, they've put hundreds of millions of dollars probably into that road. So I don't think they're going to do like some random restructuring of it that we want now, you know? So I just don't think it's a fight to fight, you know?
To put that another way, maybe accommodate truck traffic more along those routes, or be aware that we need to accommodate it while still trying to target our own internal goals. Perfect. Yep. So the question was, would this be like the Louisa Street extension? And yes, to Randy's point earlier, it would seem like if that does become a transformative project to focus on, then that would be a good fit to talk about that.
But I could also see maintaining it, just not as much emphasis on this, essentially.
There was a piece last week that came up because Mitch had brought up noise control measures, and basically the response to that was that they're not enforceable. And yet that was a goal in the comprehensive plan that we would work towards that. So that seems like one of those like line item things, like if that's not possible, let's just like reword it so that we're not aiming for something that's not worth aiming for. Sorry, Mitch, you're just gonna have a loud life over there.
Oh no, I agree. I am gonna live a loud life. I live on like one of the busiest intersections in town. I'm not like saying that, but I just think that traffic calming measures were an objective in this, and that would have made everything quieter. So that's where I'm coming from with it.
Did get traffic calming measures around one block in town that was been recently redeveloped, which is interesting because some people complain about what happened to Broadway. It didn't happen to Broadway. All that all happened. But then with 43 going through town, yeah, it'd be great to get rid of that truck traffic. That's 2007 when it was closed. It was so quiet in town. But we're not, it's not gonna happen, but could we, like they did around where the Y used to be, open up them corners so trucks don't have to crawl and take both sides of Main Street to get around the corner, you know, they make a left turn or right turn around Mr. Volkman's house, where she's nice house, like a nice little spot, but it's definitely a busy spot for him. To some do a couple things to help those trucks flow through without bothering the rest of us quite so much.
So road design, yeah, absolutely.
Slight modifications. Yeah.
All right, Randy.
I think the other thing that we touched on was that a lot of this is also caused by the GPS and where it takes, you know, the truck drivers, because a lot of them are coming in, maybe don't have any familiarity, so they're going to follow the, you know, GPS where it takes them. And is there a way for us to somehow affect that, right? Is there powers to be that do the routing for Google Maps and others there that you can actually help and influence where that, you know, truck route is? So.
Great. All right, and the last one here in the issues section was land use. How should new development or redevelopment be designed to encourage and support increased transit use, walking and biking? And not to dive too deep into the zoning code of the land use element, but yet we did reallow mixed uses. We did limit the amount of parking requirements. We did end up allowing bicycle parking substitutions. So there are a few steps that we have been ongoing. But I do think that based on the conversations with a few of the other subcommittees as well, there's still a desire to encourage those alternate modes of transport considerably more. I'm seeing some head nods. Sounds like it's resonating. Perfect. Sean, I want to make sure that we're calling you out while you continue to not necessarily speak through the sections. Is there anything that we said here that you want to add to?
Looking at that truck traffic stuff here, and I still think there's some room for a rerouting. I know we've had some conflict with that in the past here. Maybe MnDOT is one to bring to the subcommittee at one of these meetings here and get their point, but I don't see why 61 and Pelzer still is not a viable option to relieve some of that traffic, along with Mankato, and getting rid of that downtown 43 truck traffic down there. What your thoughts are on that?
I think that's a great idea. I can definitely reach out to MnDOT and see if they have anybody who'd want to talk about that.
Also with the rail, I don't know why we can't have a CP sit down at the conversation. I know EMS was striving to have better access down the east end there, back with that overpass on Louisa Street. That was a problem with response times being hung up by a train. So there is a need for an overpass down on the east end there somewhere.
All right, perfect. Thank you for those additions. All right, as we move more into the goals and objectives section, we're going to do some quick hits here unless we have some robust conversation to add here. So river use, continue to support the use of the Mississippi River for commerce, recreation, and transportation. I think that everybody seems to resonate well with people. I think that we probably haven't, it's an ongoing, it's not something, yes, we've checked off of our list, but it's ongoing. Similarly, the rail system improvements. So improving the rail system in Winona in terms of both passenger and cargo transportation in a manner that minimizes conflicts with city motorized, non-motorized transportation system. We've talked about that a little bit here. And I do want to again highlight Amtrak's Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago connection. So we are seeing passenger rail improvements occurring as well. So it seems like an ongoing goal. Similarly, the surface transportation improvements, maintaining and improving upon the surface transportation safety, efficiency, and aesthetics. And this is both road design for ease of use, but also that traffic calming component. And as well, we could probably incorporate some road design for minimizing noise. To Brian's point earlier, let's start putting in some hedges and some other softscaping that can begin to capture some of that noise. I think that we can probably have that conversation as well. And non-motorized transportation here in item 4, establish a safe and efficient non-motorized transportation system that accesses all parts of Winona and the regional trails network. And here I'll bring up the 2007 Complete Streets Policies overall plan for essentially that. Shared use paths, buffered and standard bicycle lanes, bicycle boulevards. And other elements of this plan included things like expanding our sidewalk network or categorizing our sidewalk network, adopting our ADA transition plan, which was adopted in 2018, but definitely an ongoing element. Brian DeFrang made a number of good points about how we haven't really funded a lot of local street improvements lately. It's mostly been Minnesota state aid road monies. And, you know, I think Ryan's probably nodding his head a little bit to that as well in his time as the city engineer. So really, maybe how do we incorporate those into state aid projects as well might be a conversation for us in the future, but it seems like that goal continues to resonate. Moving a little bit further down, we have public transit. So promoting and improving the public transportation system as viable alternatives to driving alone. And this goes to what Carrie was saying, which a lot of people were agreeing with. You know, how can we make sure that we have appropriate service destinations and routes as well as timing? You have to be able to make sure it's safe and convenient and comfortable. If you can sit there and know that a bus is coming in 5 minutes, you might wait for that bus. If it's going to come in a half hour or an hour, you probably won't. And that's pretty common across most transit networks. And airport improvements, continuing to support and improve the Winona Municipal Airport to serve cargo and passenger demands. And here's where I think I should turn it over to Carlos briefly for a small update.
Yeah, so we recently updated the ordinance, the zoning ordinance for the airport. And basically what that is it's just a overlay that says you can't build anything real tall right next to the airport because you don't want planes interfering with, you know, being able to take off and stuff like that. But as part of that, and since the last plan, one of the 2 runways that was formerly used has essentially been decommissioned. So we have just one runway, and that one runway has been lengthened and improved to meet standards in order to handle the aircraft that we see in and out of the airport. And so what that potentially does is open up some potentially developable land where that north-south runway currently is right now and where the existing hangars are, kind of in the southern area of the airport. And so that's one thing that I think the land use subcommittee will take a look at too, is the potential for redevelopment of a portion of the airport land, being that it is right next to city sewer and water utilities. It's flat land. Yes, you can't build too high in that area, but you have a lot of other industrial uses in the immediate vicinity. So you can support industrial use or manufacturing use in the area. And you have some flat land and some potentially developable area there. There's a number of approvals that I would have to go through the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and stuff like that. But nonetheless, that does present itself as potential for developable land in the valley area of the city, where we're continually looking for additional commercial and industrial property.
All right, I'm seeing lots of head nods. Oh, and Sean, jump on in, my friend.
I have a question for Carlos. How big are the planes can the airport handle? Is there some small cargo stuff, or is it all smaller jet single prop stuff?
I don't know the details on, what the capacity is. All I know is that the main runway was improved to handle the type of traffic that we foresaw the airport handling into the future. So essentially it meets the standards that we need to serve the type of aircraft that we think we'll see into the future.
Did it also get the upgrade on the navigational system as well, or not?
Potentially, yes. My
Okay.
understanding is that basically everything was brought up to where it needs to be for our airport.
So I'm absolutely ignorant about the airport. Why do we have an airport? Who uses it? What's it for?
We have a lot of regular users of the airport, both for corporate planes, but then private users of the airport as well. And so it's something that we have had as a city asset for a number of years, but the configuration of the airport has changed quite a bit. And the ability for the airport to accommodate different styles of aircraft has changed. So there used to be 3 runways that went down to 2, and now there's just 1, but that 1 basically serves for what all the needs that we have it for. And so the continuing use of the airport, I think, is something that a lot of people see as something that is important for Winona to maintain. But given the changing nature of the industry and the changing regulations, is there some opportunity to reuse some of the land that was used for aviation in the past for developable land now? And I think the answer to that is something that we should look at exploring in the next 15, 20 years here.
I think it would be helpful to know who is using it, because in my mind, it is corporate jets. But if it's more than that, that's great. I mean, could you fly to the cities for $900? I don't know. I just would like to know who's using it. Cargo? Is it passengers? Whatever.
I think that we can definitely pose that question to Brian DeFrank, since he does most of the management of that under his public works umbrella, and make sure that we bring him in to be prepared to answer that question at the next meeting. I think that's a valuable question. We also have some other ground to cover too. So we might have a big meeting. We might have to do 2 more meetings in July of just background information, which is acceptable. All right, I do want to continue on here. So here we have the commercial harbor and port facilities. And to Diane's point, we intend to bring in Community Development Director Lucy McMartin to maybe address this a little bit more. Same with the rail relocations and safety improvements. Much of this is still ongoing, as has been discussed. And I think that there are some laudable goals in terms of efficiencies of the rest of our transportation network. If we look to item number 3 here, continuing to support and enhance passenger rail service. This largely is a support role for the city of Winona. We don't run any of our own passenger rail service. One thing that I do want to note is there's an opportunity to really utilize the land around the Amtrak station if it is going to be a welcoming point. This has been brought up by our Heritage Preservation Commission, and it's been brought up slightly as well by the Land Use Committee, talking about how we can really use that as a greeting point for Winona, and many people who do come here and have inelastic demand for vehicles are able to come to Winona via Amtrak and then stay a weekend or go back. So real opportunity to make a more robust moment there. Improving transit service. Obviously, we've talked about this slightly before, but you know, that the weekend service, improved hours, improved timings. The planning for the interstate bridge reconstruction. And Randy wants to jump in here.
Yeah, just Luke, jumping back on the transit service. So can somebody educate me on the dial-a-ride service? What is that? And
Carrie is probably our most plugged in individual, but you can dial in and request a ride. But I believe it has to be 24 hours in advance. Is that correct, Carrie?
Have to be, but if you're getting it, say if you're taking it for your job, you'll want to do it days in advance, because otherwise there's no guarantee. It's not like a bus route where it follows. It's curb to curb service. So from wherever you are to wherever you want to go, but it has to be at least 4 blocks off the bus route, because otherwise you should just take the route. That's the logic.
so it's like a taxi service, only it's a public,
Right.
if you will, there. Okay, interesting.
But it's also so then they extended, instead of extending the routes to include nights and weekends, they just have a dial-a-ride, bring you curb to curb. So it could be on a bus route where you're going at that time,
Got it.
but it's just one. And so, you know, there's really limited possibilities there for multiple people going multiple places. And now it's $5 on the nights and weekends for each leg of the journey for each passenger, which is, I think, really prohibitive for the people who tend to use our public transit.
Thank you. And then I thought the other day I saw like a Lyft card. Do we have both Lyft and Uber traffic here in town or not?
Only Lyft operates in Winona, Uber does not. But that you bring up a good point of how can we supplement our additional movement through our cities by using private car sharing as well. Sean, we see your hand. We're not ignoring you.
Do we have any data on public transit by chance? Volume and the high density routes that are taken?
We do. I can provide that to you for our next meeting. Absolutely.
Okay. And have we truly identified any of the problems with that? Or are we just looking to just make things more efficient?
A couple of years ago, we did go through and try to improve efficiency. We rerouted all 4 routes that used to meet in the core of downtown at the transit shelter and added 2 substations on the west end and the east end of town. And the intention there was to improve efficiency. There was a bit of a hiccup in that we timed that with COVID. And so our numbers might not be the most reflective of good transit use. And many other transit services are seeing that same issue. So when we do provide that information to you, don't be surprised if there are asterisks on that document saying, yep, this was a COVID year.
I was pretty amazed at all the different forms of kind of a public transit service there listed in the 2007 comp plan. Not taken into consideration. I don't know what we have left for cab services, but you have private organizations, state colleges that offer some sort of transit as well. And I didn't know if they're ORC, DAF, DAC and stuff there. If there's some collaboration going on with that stuff, or everybody's kind of running their own show.
Well, I think collaboration when it comes to transit service is a great thing to kind of take a look at for this next plan too, both in terms of private services such as Lyft, and then our favorite scooters that are likely coming to Winona at some point soon. So there'll be multiple ways to get to where you need to go. It's not necessarily just the city bus service. So being open to those other modes of getting to where you need to go, I think is important for us to mention as well.
And to add to that, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds into the Winona riders, but there is a push by some people in our community to focus on, maybe if we have a lot of different organizations providing their own shuttle services, maybe we could collaborate and make our bus network more accessible by lowering rates, making sure that, there's fare free transit services across the United States. We did look at this a few years ago for the city of Winona. They tend to increase ridership by around 60%. So I know that there is a group in town that is pretty committed to trying to push that through as well. All right, this next item is a plan for the interstate bridge reconstruction. I think that we can probably safely remove this from our plan unless anybody really wants to build another bridge. Seeing none, we'll continue on. We have discussed revising truck routes. Does anybody have anything to add that they have not already said earlier today?
One thing I've noticed there that cities will do is certain areas of town there, they'll restrict some of that truck traffic to certain hours of the day. Has that been looked at?
I don't know that has. I'll go back and check some other planning documents, but that's a really good idea as well. The next item here is improving Highway 61 access points and frontage roads. So specifically Violet and Pelzer streets. There was a project from MnDOT already to accomplish that. I think that we can safely write achieved. I'm certain that there are still things that people want to see changed there just because of the oddity of those locations, but I'm seeing some head nods here. Perfect. Pursuing priority road improvements. So here we have the Louisa Street extension, Louisa Street overpass, Sarnia Street extension into the Riverbend Industrial Park connecting to Louisa Street. If this committee does feel that it is important to explore that, we do feel pretty safe that we could say that that's a transformative project being referred to that other subcommittee. And maybe what we should label it, well, of course, Louisa Street extension is pretty consistent across past efforts. Maybe just off of Highway 61 connections or something similar. Ways that we can really begin to think robustly about that from a higher level, and then also drill down into, yes, is it an extension? Is it an overpass? Not necessarily handcuffing them to the ideas from 2007. Any thoughts? All right, you guys were flying through this. I appreciate it. But please, I don't want to, brevity is not in and of itself necessarily something good. I will spend as many meetings as it takes to come up with a good plan. It's a citywide trail system. Here we talked briefly earlier about the 2018 parks plan, and I think that it would be important for this group to reiterate those goals that are found in that 2018 plan. I think many of you have already voiced those types of ideas, and I'm seeing head nods, looks of agreement. Again, stop me if you don't want to hear my voice anymore. Mitch?
What do you want me to say that I haven't said already? You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like, I don't think really any of these things in the citywide trail system has been fully achieved. So that's what I'll come out and say. And I think a lot of it, and I'm trying to find like, economical solutions to how we could achieve those things and do it quickly. And I just think that consistent signage through everything, and then painting bike lanes and crosswalks, lots of them, put them all over the place, just to try and make people think like, oh, there's other people who are using the road, because I think that the roads work fine and great for cars. Like we've talked about how we love that we can get from place to place so quickly because of the grid system. And I just think that all the roads need to be like for everyone that uses them. Yeah.
What is the status of the Bluffs Traverse? Is that for now or next meeting?
Bluffs Traverse has ongoing elements that are in the implementation stage. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not your resident expert to talk about where they are in one individual element, but I can definitely check in for future meetings. And Mitch has more information than I do.
Yeah. So what I know of the Bluffs Traverse so far is that you can go from Sugarloaf and then you can go up to where the ice climbing wall is. And then from there, it spits you out on like Garvin Heights, like just on a road by like a utility box up there. And there's no sign, there's nothing that gives any indication of where you're supposed to go. And then you walk down that road, and there's actually like the Kruger Natural Area, which is owned by WSU, and there are trails through there and it is open to the public. But the only way to get into it is on this private residence's driveway. And I can see where the path is like opening into the woods, and he has purposefully blocked it up with tons of huge trees. So like stacked there on purpose. So if we can find a way to get into the Kruger Natural Area, you know what I mean? And then connect that up to Garvin Heights, and then Garvin Heights can go down and go into Holzinger. I mean, like it's all right there. We're all so close, But anyway, that's the Bluffs Traverse. Sorry, I'm going on. This is dream of mine, obviously.
Walked that path that Mitch, you've talked about stuff, and I agree. You come out on top of Garvin Heights and you're just sort of dropped out on the road, and it's like, okay, where do you go now? And you just start walking, and you do walk across that area. And what we did notice was my daughter and I, we walked by that Kruger area stuff through there, but didn't know how to get into it. I mean, we're looking, it's like, okay, yeah, it looks like it would be a nice place to walk through, but where do you access? So we ended up just staying on the road and walking eventually down to Garvin Heights, and then took the trail down, from there. But I do have, kudos to the city or whoever put the effort into doing the redo on the bluff, on the Sugarloaf, trail and stuff on through there. I mean, I've walked it when it was the old one, and it was with very young kids, and it was very dangerous. And now it's just, night and day difference. And so we take visitors up there on a regular basis. So.
Sean, we see your hand again. I believe, oh, you're taking it down. All right. And I think this is a good opportunity to note that we can definitely express support again in the transportation section for those elements, and we can link directly to the Bluffs Traverse plan in the document. And we also do have the Park and Recreation Subcommittee that will be reiterating those and reevaluating that plan as well. So that they'll be able to look there and say, hey, what did we miss? Did we miss that connection? Is it quite literally that we have nothing planned for that in implementation, or is it just that we haven't gotten to the implementation yet? So that's a really good point.
Just an observation. I feel like there's many projects that we've realized either money is the barrier or the city council is the barrier. But it also feels like one of the barriers is public opinion for some of these issues, particularly about the bikeability of town. Having been an avid reader of the Winona Post for many years, it's clear that not everyone wants bike lanes in this town. So I wonder, I don't know that this document is how you address that, but that certainly has to be a part of the plan moving forward, is how to approach communication with the public.
I will note that you are probably the 5th subcommittee to mention communication. That is a theme that is ringing true across all elements of this plan.
I think communication is very important, but I think also that if public perception is that the city is spending, taxpayer money foolishly, or, wasting or throwing it around, I think that they're going to be disgruntled and they're going to be less supportive of the plans that we bring to the table. So I think things like traffic calming, things like bike lanes, like that, these things are great for sure, and that we should incorporate them in new construction and in projects when we have to do, when something needs to be repaired or redone, of course, but that the Broadway diet plan, I think, showed us that if you want to tear up something that's existing and people think, hey, it's good enough, it's gonna be a huge inconvenience to the businesses and to the, to the people who use that street and to people who don't want to think about how their money's being spent. I think that, yeah, it's good to re-envision the city and to think big, but it's also good to think careful and to think, using the taxpayers' money really wisely will increase their trust in what in what the city is doing. So,
On this subject, I have to make a comment about Wabasha Street for Bicycle Boulevard. Is works good for that street, for that purpose. There's not much traffic on it, but I get complaints that it's a bumpy street. But it being the only concrete street, I'd say let's keep it concrete. But maybe do some repair on some of that in places. And the East End, big box retail area, that seem like bikes and pedestrians are an afterthought out there. And I don't know how I would make it work entirely, but you got the area, the neighborhood north of the tracks, they have some access, that retail area is also close to them, whether you bike or walk through there without using Mankato or Louisa Street would be great.
One improvement that I was a part of and that did happen is the sidewalk in front of like the Qdoba and new storage facility just on the north side of A&W there. That sidewalk was put in, and then it was just kind of floating for a couple of years. But then what the city did is make a connection between that development and Mugby Junction. So you can go from the north and get down into that area now. And when you come out right at A&W there, you can access a sidewalk that goes along Menard Road as well, and that continues all the way down too. So are there definitely improvements that can be made? Yeah, definitely. But there is at least a base level of a couple sidewalks there right now. But I definitely see that, and this comes into land use too. We see that as a future development area, especially the large parking lots where you can do some infill development. And with that infill development, how can we make connections to improve that pedestrian network in that area? Because especially not just commercial reuse and redevelopment, but the potential for residential dwellings in that area as well. They currently do exist with the Sugarloaf Living and then the adjacent 55+ housing. And so maintaining connections, I think will be and enhancing them will be important in that area in the future. And I also think the MnDOT's current project on Mankato will help people to get across Mankato and access Lake Park.
All right, I'm going to take a quick pause because we're 5 minutes away from talking about this for an hour already. And I want to make sure that everybody is able to plan for our next meeting, and then we'll dive back in. And until people filter away, I'm happy to keep talking about this because I do this for a living. So I will talk about this for as long as possible. I'm looking to potentially schedule this subcommittee again for July 7th. This 4 p.m. hour seems to work well for everybody. Is anybody having an extended July 4th holiday that won't be able to make it on the 7th? Does another date work better for you, Diane? Okay. Okay. All right, then we will pencil in 4 p.m. on July 7th. And I do want to kind of note what we can get into at that meeting. I intend for us to focus somewhat more on the chapters 4 and 5 of the 2007 Complete Streets Policy. So that's the actual Complete Streets Policy and the policy recommendations. And I'll send this out in a calendar invite to you. And also the design elements that are in the 2007 comprehensive plan. And we begin to see them right here where we're kind of talking right now. What does a separated bike trail within the public right of way look like? What does a narrower street look like? And what are the processes for getting those implemented? Because I've heard continuously here, how do we implement? How do we implement? How do we implement? So we would like to continue to have that conversation as well. If everybody's fine continuing, I do want to try and get through the rest of our rubric briefly before we do close up here today. So moving beyond our citywide trail system, and I want to thank everybody. Go right ahead.
Clarify, you sent out a couple of emails about a speaker just in a couple of days here, but it wasn't clear to me. The first one didn't say, I think, the date. And so I wasn't sure if it was 2 different events or one event, 2 emails.
Both of those are on the 21st of June. One of them is at 11:30 in the morning and one of them is at 6:30 p.m. The 11:30 in the morning is a conversation more focused on housing, but we are inviting every single subcommittee member to that meeting. And that will also be broadcast on Zoom to subcommittee members. At 6:30 p.m., it's more of a general, how do we have efficient growth of communities conversation called a curbside chat. And that's open to the entire general public. So anybody can go to that. Feel free to invite your friends. I find it riveting. I'm going to bring the whole family. I hope that everybody else does. And we do expect that that should be pretty well attended. We've sent out many invites to that, and other people have expressed interest already. So we have a maximum allowed capacity of 150 people, and that one is at the Friendship Center. And Carrie, if you need me to send another email related to that, I'm happy to do so. So just let me know. Perfect. All right, any other scheduling questions? Seeing none. One of the elements here listed in the trail section is the waterfront trail. I do want to note that our transformative projects subcommittee is treating that as one of those transformative projects, and it is diving in deeper. As we look at sidewalks and paths in neighborhoods, we did have some changes in our unified development code that does encourage sidewalk implementation, at least on one side of the street. Our planning commission has had pretty robust conversation over the last few years on a pretty regular basis, about at least one time a year on, hey, we need to make that both sides of the street. And the 2007 comprehensive plan does mention that as well. We want to encourage sidewalk implementation. Related bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We'll dive into that a bit more in the 2017 Complete Streets Policy. And then local street improvements. This is part of what I want to talk about for next time is what do our rights of way look like? And how does how do the goals from this plan, which I expect many of you are going to be supportive of, how can we reiterate them and make sure that we find implementation sources for them? So I do want you all to take a quick look at these sections. They're a bit dense, the illustrations as well as this table, and start to talk about what does that look like? And similarly, traffic calming, which is going to be more in depth in the 2017 Complete Streets policy. What is the community comfortable with? Because we did do surveys related to that. And what's implementable? What can we actually do? And with that, I think we've covered everything I wanted to today in a nice tight 1 hour period. Are there any final questions or comments related to the overall elements that we looked at somewhat more in depth here over the last 3 weeks? All right, I know that the schedule says that we're going to start doing our goals and objectives in July, but I think that there are a number of questions that still need to be answered and background information to sort through. So we'll plan on, again, looking at some of these right-of-way treatments and the 2017 Complete Streets policy and policy recommendations for next time. And with that, I will see you all on the 7th at 4 p.m. Thank you.